Key Concept 6.1 set the stage for Period 6. It was about the rise of industrial capitalism during this period we call the Second Industrial Revolution. Key Concept 6.2 is about all the changes that went along with this change in society. Key Concept 6.2 says, the migrations that accompanied industrialization transformed both urban and rural areas of the United States and caused dramatic social and cultural change. This is the time period in American history when the very definition of what it meant to be American was changing. And we saw in Key Concept 5.1 in the last unit that new immigrant groups flooded into the United States in the 1840s and 1850s from Ireland and Germany and China. During the last decades of the 19th century and the first decades of the 20th century, new immigrant groups appeared on the scene. They came from Southern and Eastern Europe, and they began to come to cities on the East Coast. You can think of Ellis Island. Now, a lot of Americans, including myself, can trace their ancestry to this time period. My Italian ancestors came over in the early 1900s. It was also during this time that many of America's Jewish population first appeared in the US, coming from Poland, Russia, and other countries in the south and east of Europe. At the same time, immigrants from Asia began settling on the West Coast and on the East Coast of the country. Internally, African Americans began moving northward to escape oppression of the South and find better economic opportunities. Many of these groups settled into cities and made their own ethnic neighborhoods. You can think of Chinatown in San Francisco or Little Italy in New York. These neighborhoods are proof that immigrants were looking to protect their own identities, to speak their language and share their culture with each other, but also to settle and make a permanent home in the United States. As people began pouring into cities, the nature of life in America began to change. All of a sudden, America was increasingly urban rather than rural. The cities were crowded, polluted, and really dangerous at times. Many people had no access to clean drinking water or government services. And at the same time, all the industrial growth of this period began to expand the middle class and create a new consumer culture. People could afford to buy things. They could afford to have leisure time. So this key concept is not just about immigration from abroad or the movement of African Americans or cities. It's also about the never-ending push westward, which has really defined so much of American history. One of the things that made traveling westward much easier was the completion of what we call the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. And this was this loose network of rails that could help you move from the East Coast to the West Coast entirely by rail, rather than by horse and buggy or by foot. In addition to creating new settlements and eventually new states in the Union, all this westward expansion pushed Native Americans further westward. And the US government just started violating all of its treaties with Native Americans. It declared war on them, eventually relocating many Native Americans onto reservations, where the tribes sought to define their own identity, protect their heritage, and develop policies that would allow them to support themselves financially. It was this kind of dramatic change that they're referring to in the key concept when they say dramatic social and cultural change during this time period.